Yo, so in the last video, we created a very basic inventory system with item moving. Um, we can add items to the inventory with starter items, and that's just about it. So we just created the foundation for what's to come. In this video, we're going to add more item management things like splitting stacks. When you right click, it'll give you half the stack. Or if you're holding a stack and you right click, it'll place one down. Things like that. Swapping items, adding items back up together. So we're going to get started on that. But first, I want to organize this out a little bit, make it look a lot nicer. So we're just going to add headers. So we'll go header starter item. And we're going to make this inventory list private because we aren't going to need to see that anymore. When we add more slot holders for things like hotbars, maybe even containers, we're going to need more. And we're going to have more prefabs for things. We'll just go slot prefab. And then we'll just call this like item drag. Yeah. We're going to put all of these into regions just to organize it. So we're just going to create a region. We're just going to call this one utils end region, and we're just going to put like find slot in there. We'll put clear slot in there, and then we'll put add item in there. And then we'll make another region called item moving. This will have all of our item moving stuff in it, like start drag, end drag. I kind of want to rename these. Let me just rename item, and I'll rename this one to end drag item. There we go. So we have them ones, and then I'll just call this inventory visuals. Put all of this in there. Just clean this up. Get rid of this space. There we go. That looks a lot nicer. And inside the inspector we should have. Yep, so that looks a lot prettier. Another thing I wanted to do was change this to white because it'll look a lot nicer. Yeah, it does. It looks a lot nicer. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna add, I'm probably gonna start with split stacks. So we'll create a public void. We'll call it split stack, and then we'll go give it our slot object. And we're gonna want to get our slot. So I'm just gonna copy this one, and then we'll check if our slot has an item in it, and we'll set our drag slot to that item, and then drag slot dot amount equals math f dot seal dot slot dot amount divided by 2. So what this basically does is, let's say you're trying to split 7 in half, it's going to give you a percentage, and you don't want to have, 3.5 of a rock, you want to have a whole number. So what this does basically is this will give you, it'll round it down 1. So if it's 2.5, or if it's 3.5, this will give me 3. And then for the next one, in your other slot, what we want to do is we want to use mathf.floor, and this will round it up. So if it's 3.5, it will give us 4. So now the stack that is left will have 3, and the stack on our hand will have 4, which is 7. Otherwise, we'll just have percentaged items, and we'll be losing items and stuff. So we don't want that to happen. We're going to check if this is equal to 0, And if the slot that is left is equal to 0, we're just going to clear the slot. Otherwise, we're going to have a slot with an item in it with the amount of 0, and we don't want that. And if it does still have items in it, we will set it to floor slot amount divided by 2. There we go. And then we're going to update our inventory. So now we're going to test to see if this one works. So if we right click on a slot, it should give us half. Okay, hang on, I forgot. There's one more thing we have to do for this to work. We have to update our slot class for it to handle that. So if we need to add a new if statement in here with our event data, which is this here, we need to check the button is equal to pointer event data dot input button dot left click, and then we're going to put all this in here, and then we're going to check else if event data dot button is equal to pointer event data dot input button dot right click, and then we're going to check if our inventory currently isn't dragging an item. Oh, drag slot dot item, and if we're not currently dragging an item, inventory system dot instance dot split stack this game object. So if we right click on a slot and we're not dragging an item, it's going to split the stack. Let me get rid of that. It's going to annoy me. Now it should work. If I right click, there we go. And you can see it's left 37 in that slot and given us 38. Now we can't add the items back up on top of each other once we split them, which is a problem because we're going to have filled inventory spaces. So we're going to fix that now. And the way I'm going to do that is inside of here. We're going to do that inside end drag. So we're just going to add stuff to this. So the first thing we're going to check is this checks if there isn't an item in the slot. If there is an item in the slot, we're going to check if the item that's in the slot is equal to the item that we're currently dragging. And we're going to just add it on. Just drag slot dot amount. And then we will clear slot, drag slot. There we go. And then we're going to check if it isn't equal, we're going to swap them out. So because we're swapping them out, we're going to have to store what's in the slot first so we don't lose it. So I'm just going to create slot.amount. We're just going to create them two to store what's in the slot. And then we're going to set the slot to what's in the drag slot. And then we're going to set the drag slot to what we've just stored. There we go. Now that should swap items out and add them on top of each other. So if you left click on this one, there we go, it swaps it out. If I right click on there and I left click, there we go. It adds it back on top of each other. So that will stop us from taking up an infinite amount of space, and we can just stack them back on top of each other. Now what I think we're going to add is the ability to drop one item. So we're going to create another public void. I'm going to call it drop1. We're going to give it our slot object. And we're just going to copy and paste this again. Here we go. Now we're going to check if the slot has an item in it. If the slot.item is equal to what we're currently dragging, then we're going to slot.amount. We're just going to plus 1 onto that. And we're going to take 1 off the drag slot. And if there isn't, well, if it's not equal, we're going to just end drag item, which will swap it out. So if you right click on a slot to drop 1, there isn't the same item, it will just swap it out. Now we're going to check else on this. If the slot if the slot doesn't have an item in it, then we're going to set the slot to what we're trying to place down, which is the drag item, and then we're just going to add 1 to that, and then drag slot dot amount. We're going to take 1 off that. Now, if you use plus plus or minus minus, it's just plus 1, take 1. If you use minus equals 1, then it's going to add 1, but then you can add as many as you want. So I'm just using minus minus for the sake of simplicity. Now, if the slot that we just placed 1 of, if our drag slot is equal to 0 now, it's just going to have, it's still going to be a rock, but it's going to have 0 as the amount. So we're not going to, we don't want that to happen, so we're just going to clear it if it is equal to 0 at the end of this, and then we're going to update our inventory. Okay, so that should work. Now we just got to update it in our slot class, which is simple. We're just checking an else on this, inventory system.instance.drop1 game object. That's it. So if the drag slot does have an item in it, and we right click, it's going to drop 1. This should work. So if I right click, there we go. You see it drops 1, and you can add them back on top of each other. If you try and right click on a slot that isn't the same, it's just going to swap it out. If I just split this down till we have 3 left, you can see now it's just cleared that slot out, and you can right click it and it will just halve it. And there we go. We now have a lot more item movement potential. So I'm going to leave that here for this one. In the next one, we're going to do max item stack sizes. So it's just going to be a property inside of here for the max stack size. And we're going to have to rewrite all of our amount calculations because we're going to have to account for checking if it's a max stack size and whatever we leave over and whatever stuff. So I'm going to leave that here for this one. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah, I'll see you next time. See ya.